Dr. Michael Wool, I am so excited to have this conversation with you around this thing that all females have. It's called a menstrual cycle. And getting these questions answered that I have and things I never even learned about with some of these words that are being thrown around, like follicular phase, luteal phase. I have no idea what they mean. All I know is how I feel and that I want to understand what it is I feel. So thank you for hopping on today and helping me to create a way to explain this.
Hi, Bonnie. It's Bonnie. Thanks a lot for having me on again. And it's great to have this opportunity to talk to you about the menstrual cycle. And of course, all females in their teens begin to have menstruation, and it's very confusing. The only thing that really happens is they feel different each different day, and they start to have blood loss. A bunch of physiology happens, and that's really what they understand. And it's this understanding innately that happens. But now we're going to really sort of talk about what actually does happen and what does it mean and what are all these hormones doing, and sort of give you a framework for understanding female physiology without all these giant words. And sort of really, more importantly, understand what your body's energy is doing for all this, because it's an interplay between the energy of the body, the hormones, signaling, and your own daily activities and these activities that are happening in the face of this cycle that happens very regularly in every female's life.
Yeah, all I know is that I started to have all of these symptoms changes. My brain felt like it was constantly in a disarray certain times of the month, and nobody knew how to explain it to me. Why was I all of a sudden hungry? Why did my body not feel like I could lift as much? And it was almost like right in sync. Every 3 to 4 weeks, all these changes happened. And nowadays, you're starting to see all these big words, like you said, come and they're saying, well, oh, that's this phase. I have no idea what that means. I just want you to tell me, even today, I'm 2 days out from starting my menstrual cycle, why my brain feels like it can't think and I'm irritated. The littlest thing makes me feel irritated. And if you would ask me yesterday, I would have felt fine. And what that switch does for us and how we as women can understand that better. So diving into that, the first question I'm going to say is, week one, why do I feel so good? And talk about this chart that we have in front of us.
Yeah. So this chart is the menstrual cycle, and basically for all intents and purposes, the reason for this cycle is so that you can produce an egg at a certain time of the month, and that egg is available to be fertilized and the continuation of the human species, right? So, and that whole developmental cycle requires that egg to be supported by the body. The egg basically has to have a happy home to live and develop if it gets fertilized. So everything around that is to support that. So if during these phases, and you'll see in this drawing, these little squiggly lines, some of them are going up, some of them are going down. And it's not so important for you to actually know the dates that these things happen. What's important to understand is that these hormones, which you oftentimes hear at the gynecologist, who says, oh, your estrogen levels, we'll check your estrogen levels, or we'll check your progesterone levels, or we'll test your LH and FSH. And that's what these measurements are of where they are in the cycle. And it's meaningful at later times during your life. In other words, when you are of reproductive age, these hormones behave a certain way. And then they start to change as you begin to enter perimenopausal. And then later on, when your cycles have stopped and you're in menopause, these curves do look different. And we'll talk about that later on. But let's just say for the intent to understand that these hormones are there to support the egg in your reproductive years. And when that egg doesn't get fertilized, then these hormones change again. And that's when you start to feel different. So each phase of where these hormones are determines how you feel. So if you feel crabby, it's because you didn't get fertilized, the egg didn't get impregnated, it didn't park itself into the thick, rich lining, which in this graph is the lower picture. The picture there is sort of a graphical indication of the thickness of your womb's lining.
So this
So,
very bottom, like right above the numbers, you're saying is that an
yes,
example of the uterus lining and in the what it looks like.
that's right.
Okay.
So when it's nice and thick, where you see the picture of the ovarian cycle, the egg popped out. It's got a nice, comfortable nest to sit in, which is a thick, blood-rich lining. Okay. And these
Mm-hmm.
hormones are all present, and it makes a happy little nest for the fertilized egg to grow in.
And when you say these hormones are present, to make it less confusing, which one is the most abundant for us in female when we feel the best?
Yeah, you feel the best when you have estrogen. During
Okay.
your reproductive life, you feel really great when you have estrogen, which is why, of course, as you enter menopause and your estrogen manufacturing goes down,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's why you get microhormonal supplementation, okay? And that actually keeps certain parts of your body healthier. For instance, calcium metabolism, bone reabsorption, mental fortitude. And by the way, estrogen is a hormone, and it does all these different things in your body. It regulates your muscle mass. It regulates your sexual drive. It regulates your happiness. It regulates your cognitive performance.
So it's signals is what you're saying.
Right. So
Okay.
estrogen is really ubiquitous. And by the way, what's really important to understand is that this molecule runs around and flips on and off switches all day long based on what we call receptors, right? So the molecule, the hormone, falls into a receptor, and there's three major types of estrogen receptors. We're not going to get into that, but these receptors turn things on like brain function, energy production, sense of wellness. It actually controls fluid and electrolytes. So that's why, your body absorbs more water and then it gets rid of.
So with the idea when I start to feel like I'm fat has nothing to do with body fat. It's simply my body's reactive mechanism way to say, hey, we need to retain and balance these certain things based on the changes going on internally.
That's right. Remember, we're always trying to produce a happy home for a fertilized egg. So
I
that
like that.
means your tissues are plump. It means
Okay.
your tissues are plump. They're well hydrated. They have a lot of energy because the fetus needs a huge amount of ATP to develop. Okay. And by the way, your energy state changes.
Let's talk about
Okay?
that. When you
Yeah,
say energy state, in my mind, I crave and I'm so much more hungry. And so what you're saying is it's really actually a trigger that my body is trying to feed it to keep the safety net of what that uterus provides if my egg becomes ready to be fertilized and turn into a baby.
that's correct. Remember, it takes lumber to build a house. You need energy, you need fuel. And that fuel is principally sugar, glucose. Okay. And I think what's important to understand is what's going on during reproduction years as opposed to what's going on in perimenopause and what's going on in menopause, okay, in terms of energy. But when you crave chocolate or sugar or food, your principal reason is to fill your blood with enough sugar to nourish the developing embryo. So if you get fertilized and you've got an embryo growing, it's sucking glucose down like crazy because that produces ATP. That allows the embryo to build things like its fingers and its eyes and its head and its spinal cord and all the little parts that are being assembled in your womb.
So let me ask you this. If I'm taking exogenous ketones, can it replace the glucose? And I ask that because understanding that insulin will spike, but we still need that energy. If I didn't want to take glucose, can I replace that with ketones?
It's very important to understand that the body will naturally go into ketosis by itself without the need for ketones. There is a very important balance of sugar and ketones, which are the only two fuels that your body can use. But during pregnancy, it's important not to be taking exogenous ketones, not because it might be safe. There have not been enough validated studies in the use of exogenous ketone, that is, ketones you drink,
Okay.
or eat in the developing fetus. The fetus likes ketones, but it likes ketones the way it wants to get them naturally.
So
You don't
nutritional
have to.
ketosis.
That's right. Nutritional ketosis will occur. Remember, the baby is born in ketosis. The mother is in ketosis during a significant portion of their pregnancy. Okay. So now, if you happen to be taking exogenous ketones and you get pregnant, you need to stop them because you don't want to change Mother Nature's way, at least for the time being, until we have enough scientific evidence to support the use of exogenous ketones.
Oh, that's
So,
really interesting.
yeah, it's not indicated and it has not been recognized as a safe maneuver to be taking exogenous ketones during pregnancy. Okay, going back to this picture, what's really good about this picture is that at the bottom are these little squares of different colors, right? So during a period when you're menstruating and the lining is thin and it's falling off, okay, and you're losing a lot of energy. You're losing iron, you're losing blood, you're losing fluid, you're all of these, and your body's signaling, meaning your estrogen is low, your progesterone is low, your FSH and LH are all low. That's why you feel low when you menstruate, because
Mm,
there isn't an egg there to be fertilized, and the body wants to, you know, has to get rid of the old lining, put in a new one, and so on and so forth. But during that period is an optimum time to be taking exogenous ketones when you feel that loss of energy, that fatigue, that brain fog. Because remember, those hormones are part of what your brain needs. You have estrogen receptors in your brain. You have all these receptors for these hormones all over the body. And without
receptors for your hormone, and in those receptors, so I can kind of get a visual. In that receptor, are you going to receive a signal?
that's right. So when estrogen falls into the estrogen A, B, or C receptor, and there's three different types, it
Okay.
creates different things. It creates energy. It makes your muscles happy. It makes your brain happy. Okay. And when that estrogen falls away, I feel tired. I've lost blood. I've lost fluid. I've lost iron. So I don't feel good. And
So this is why ketones exogenously, when you're not pregnant, are
Mhm.
so powerful for females, especially menopause phase, because the amount of energy as you're describing that each receptor takes to produce the ATP is really sounds like validation into why that's so important for us if we're not nutritionally getting it, why this extra supplementation is huge. And with that portion of that, if we're trying to compensate that with more carbs, does that give us a trigger into the PCOS and part of that?
Okay, so that's a lot of information and a lot of things to explain.
It is,
Let's
but
let's actually take that apart a little bit, okay?
okay.
So when we look at this, a woman of reproductive years, okay, and we look at how estrogen, progesterone, LH, FSH, all these things that you really don't need to know about. You only need to know, how do I feel? How do I make myself feel better? And knowing that some things that you always know. Oh, I gained weight. That's just water, or I'm feeling lousy and tired today. I'm having cramping. The cramping is because your body's trying to throw out this dead blood and this dead uterine lining so it can get ready for the next cycle, because that other egg didn't make it across the border and get fertilized. It didn't go across the goal line, so it died. It needs to be gotten rid of. So this energy is what is a cycle during a reproductive years female. And by the way, there's the glucose. That's why you have the sugar craving. That's why you're craving that chocolate. And that's why you want to eat. You want those sugar molecules. Okay. But once you get fertilized, you now need more energy. So your body's going to go into ketosis. Why? Because you get more energy from ketones than you get from sugar. So not only does it use all the sugar it can get its hands on, the body will also start consuming your fat to make ketones to provide that additional energy to grow the fetus. Now, let's go fast forward out to menopause. As we get older, men included, our ability to use glucose as a fuel source drops by 30% around the age of 60, men and women. So that slow drop of the ability to use glucose, okay? This is someone of normal weight. This is not someone who has insulin resistance, which is a different situation. People who may have, women who may have PCOS, men who are overweight, or obesity or morbid obesity, because in those situations, which we'll talk about in a minute, are different than as you hit menopause and your body's ability to use sugar reduces. And that's a really optimum time to really make use of exogenous ketones. Why? Your body can't make enough energy, all the energy it wants from sugar. So it's going to suffer. You're going to have no energy. So not only have you lost the signaling because your estrogen is declining, because your ovaries, which produce a lot of the estrogen, are starting to decline in function. So it's delivering not enough hormones. So because of that, you're getting not enough stimulation to your muscles, not enough to your brain, not enough to your fluid balancing. And these receptors are everywhere. They're not just in your reproductive tract. Remember, the estrogen receptors, there's 3 different kinds, and these 3 different kinds are distributed over your brain, your muscle mass, your heart, your liver. All these places have estrogen receptors. And
So is
as
that
you,
why my brain feels so much better when I take these exogenous ketones?
that's right, because your ability to use sugar to produce ATP, it's all about ATP. Your entire body is about ATP, every function. I don't care if you've stubbed your toe and you're growing a new toenail. It's all about ATP and how much ATP can you deliver. So you can deliver more by making ketones because ketones give you about 30 or 40% more ATP than the same amount of sugar. So if you have sugar and ketones, you get more out of your ketones than you do. It's like the difference between regular gas and premium, okay? Because what happens is the amount of ethyl molecules is higher in premium or your octane level,
You know,
right?
what's interesting too is, and you've repeated this so many times throughout this segment is, and it just hit me. If we are an intelligence that has the ability to have a self-healing mechanism, such as a paper cut, it starts to heal itself. I stub my toe, my brain sends these triggers. You just nailed, that's so huge. If your body doesn't have the energy to support the triggers that kick you into self-healing, how do we expect our body to have the energy to do that?
Right. That's precisely right. So the body does what it needs to do to produce more energy for that healing, or produce more energy to grow that fetus, or produce that energy to have better thinking. So what does modern medical science do? Well, we know estrogen declines in menopause, right? So we give you back some estrogen, right? And there was all those controversial studies about cancer and this and that, which is why you need to have that conversation with your private physician. This is not medical advice from me. It's just making you aware to have the conversation with your doctor to understand these. Are you a candidate for RT, hormone replacement therapy? Are you not? Okay. And that's just as important. So I think there are conversations that women need to have with their internist, obstetrician, whoever, in their primary care life to understand, well, you know, what's going on with this hormonal withdrawal as I get older? Can I keep my skin nice and supple? Can I keep my muscles working, my musculature? Can I make my sexual drive continue? Can I prevent my hair from falling out? Can I have no more brain fog? Can I work the same amount of hours that I worked when I was in my 20s or 30s? And all of this is tied to this wonderful balance between the hormones, the signaling, the ketones, the sugar, and ketones really can, at the time in your life when your ability to use sugar declines, it can supplement that loss of energy availability through sugar by giving you energy availability through ketones. Most important thing to remember about ketones is that it doesn't require the garage door opener called insulin to work. Sugar requires a garage door opener called insulin to open the door and allow sugar to go into a mitochondria to be converted into ATP, the coin of energy. All of this rather seems confusing, but just remember this: you need fuel. That fuel is ATP. How you get ATP is you either get it from sugar or you get it from fat, and the fat is broken into ketones. So it's really sugar, glucose, and ketones as the fuel that goes into your mitochondria to push out ATP. And as you age, your mitochondria begin to produce less ATP, and you have changes in that level. So naturally, you fatigue easier because you don't have a big storehouse of ATP sitting around.
So here's a question that I'm thinking about as you're explaining this. If my ability to have better energy in menopause is because I don't have the estrogen receptors needing it, would that be something I could question and say, hey, menopause actually could be potentially a really amazing thing instead of thinking it as a negative thing based off of my body not having to need so much glucose and then the most efficient energy because of how those signalings are happening. I get what I'm really getting at is there's the idea that women, when we go into menopause or perimenopause, we're kind of looked down at like being a problem or having something out of our control. And I'm trying to look at it from actually, what is the most positive thing about being able to go into menopause?
Well, that's a really important question that has largely been ignored for decades, even in medical school. The idea that menopause is sort of been brushed aside. And I think it's important to have the ability to understand that menopause is not to be brushed aside, and it needs to be addressed in a much higher level of science, with the benefits being that women will have a better productive life, more energetic, more cognitively aware, etc. And what's really important is that Melinda Gates has made it her charter of her nonprofit to give away $800 million this year in the pursuit of better understanding menopause in women, to make educational and research funds available, because she's entering menopause and she figured out that, wow, there's no support out there for me.
No,
And I'm just
there's not.
hanging in the midair without having the support that I need. So I think this is a super important topic, in that how the energy of the body, the changes in the fuel requirements as we age, as our hormones change, men and women, by the way, which is why men get testosterone supplementation, and now with the idea of micro testosterone manipulation. That's the latest trend in men's health. So this is all about the importance of aging properly. We can't necessarily, at least at this point, turn the clock back, but we can change the slope of aging from this to this, aging slowly, maintaining function. Why? Because we're now understanding these hormones, progesterone, estrogen, their roles, and the role of how they fit in brain health, muscle health, heart health, because they're partners. They're partners with the energy source. They're the signaling. They're the on-off switches all over the body. And by giving exogenous ketones later on in life to supplement that energy deficit, is recognized now as a greater contributor to living well, to having a better health span, to having a better longevity curve and a functional curve. I think that's really important. We might live longer as a result of, better chemotherapy, or, better vaccinations, or etc. But the real question is, are we going to live a high quality life health span, as opposed to lifespan? You want a health span that's really long. And we can do that now with the tools and understanding genetics, and understanding all of these sort of interplay of energy, signaling, hormones, etc.
That's really quite interesting. I like that you touched on the base about there's a bigger awareness coming in the education around menopause. The old school lack of education way of thinking is nothing can be done. You go into menopause and these women feel like they have lost, like what hope is there for us after I have my go into menopause? You know, low energy, all these things. But what it sounds like is it's an opportune time to re-navigate your body's functions. And if you know how to strategize properly with these ketones, it's like a renewal of life in a different way. You don't have the bleeding. So your energy gets to be used in different ways if you have the right kind of tools. Diet, exercise, which a lot of women after 55 stop doing those things. You're taking exogenous ketones and they were supporting these phases of the menstrual cycle. Take away the menstrual cycle, now you have consistency in the way you're going to feel longer. Would that be right?
That's exactly right. And that's the whole point, is that, first of all, medicine is expanding at an astronomical rate. And our understanding of body function, signaling, and all these is just growing literally by the moment. And with the advent of AI assisted in healthcare, medicine, and therapeutics, diagnostics, this is an amazing time to be a human being, and having all of this application of software, hardware, diagnostics, the advent and better understanding of body energy. And it's a great time to try these things because it has a body of scientific evidence which is reaching a critical mass of investigators, scientists, people who are beginning to understand. Plus, our understanding of food and nutrients has immensely improved in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, if you just think about it, the food pyramid's been thrown out in 20.
Everything's been changed there.
Right. And so science evolves and gives us information. But one thing is core. Our bodies are still driven by two fuels and only two fuels.
Ooh, say that again.
Those, our body is
Yeah.
only driven by two fuels, ketones and glucose. Everything we eat gets converted to ketones or converted to glucose. It is and ketones are largely been ignored. But in the application of ketosis, menopause, perimenopause, those symptoms that occur are because of a decline in energy. So can we bring this energy level back up and ameliorate, reduce, not 100% eliminate, but we can reduce these problems that occur as a result of the persistent decline of energy. So by keeping in ketosis at a time when you don't have to worry about it during pregnancy, you can be in ketosis in perimenopause and menopause and supplement that loss of conversion of glucose to ATP by having ketone to ATP. That makes sense?
It really does. I think every single woman, men too, but over the age of 50 should be so excited about these ketones. Pure and simply just for the fact that like what you've been conditioned to think, like what you were with the food pyramid, that carb heavy, everything, they flipped it. That food pyramid is actually fat dependent heavy utilization, which fat converts to ketones. If you have more ketones, you have more energy. If you have more energy, longevity, age, brain disease, everything is supported in how your quality of life is. If I don't know how anybody couldn't hear what you just said and not think to themselves, how do I get more information on this? Where do I learn more? And that's the next thing is we're building out and educating and the science is there, but we need the support and the help to be able to grow it, to put it out there, to do the research.
That's right. Research is happening, and knowledge, just the fund of the totality of human knowledge is expanding at an exponential hyper rate. And as this information brings clarity to our cellular function, brings clarity to our genetics, brings clarity to, you know, how we eat, how we exercise, how we think, how we read. It's enormous. But the consistent thing here is your energy patterns matter. Your energy patterns matter, and how you understand them will be a significant contributor as to how you will live your lifespan, your health span, and the quality of your life is based, is ultimately through all these things that we're learning. How you understand that makes how you live. The single thing that a human that you can do for yourself is to understand the energy of your body. So in understanding these hormone fluxes, yeah, you know what? You can listen to all these big words like luteal phase and follicular phase. You don't need to know that. You just need to know how you feel. Oh, I don't feel good today. I must, and I'm bleeding. I'm having cramping. That's real. Someone who tells you, oh, your follicular phase and your estrogen is X, Y, or Z level and your FSH and LH, you really don't care about it.
I would have no idea. Even now at 40, I'm hearing these words and I've had the conversations with my OBYGN and it just goes right over my head. All I know is yesterday my brain shut off. I cried randomly at something that probably normally wouldn't cry about, and I needed a nap. I felt exhausted.
And that's right. And here's the thing. This isn't just happening to humans. This happens to lions, tigers, and bears. I mean, they have the same mechanics, the same energy production cycles, the same biology, the same physiology, the same biochemistry. The difference between the bears and us is that we have the science behind us to understand how we can change it, how we can change and supplement and understand nutrition. But our knowledge base, by us understanding how we feel, by having some understanding of basic human energy dynamics, that in itself will help you. And I think we people do these things sort of empirically. I mean, they sort of find their solution. Oh, I'm craving chocolate, or, I'm have a lot of weight gain, or, I feel puffy. I can't put my shoes on, or I'm feeling very brain dead. Well, these are the instances in which you just have to understand my energy's not right. And so am I going to get fuel by eating carbohydrates and giving glucose and causing insulin resistance? Or am I going to take some ketones or go to a fast or, eat 816 or all these maneuvers to raise the higher powered molecule, ketones, to produce more ATP that my body wants? That's a pretty simple concept. I need more energy. Where am I going to get it?
I think that is the perfect place to close out this segment, is us explaining and sharing how I feel and you letting me know what that means in the menstrual cycle. The next phase, if people want to understand, is energy and our patterns in foods. I think that would be the best way to complete this and invite people to join us in our next session, because we're going to keep having these conversations and this is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, I think that this sort of general introduction, and we can drill down into specifically where estrogen is best for you, where, exercise is best for you, where ketones are best for you, where sugar is good for you. And I think that these are all things that we'll explore, because this is a big topic. I mean, each one of these phases or energy cycles, or going from reproductive years to semi-reproductive years to non-reproductive years, is in itself, hours and hours of classroom work for a medical student. So we would not expect you, the audience, to really understand this in one go.
Dr. Michael, well, let's end this. Please tell everybody again what your credentials are to highlight what makes you so incredibly well spoken in this area and why they should listen.
Well, I've been a medical scientist for almost 40 years, and I've done a lot of work in immunology and infectious diseases. I've done a lot of work in HIV. I've looked at dementia. I was one of the early investigators for HIV dementia, and I was instrumental in helping to understand the HIV genome. I've also applied that learning to ketogenic science, as well as immunology, the aging, longevity, inflammation, and most importantly, I think in understanding the energy that the body needs for good function, the energy it needs to have top performance, the energy it needs to have a good health span and reduce disease. So I think after all these 40 plus years of investigating as a scientist and practicing as a physician, I think I hope to bring the message to patients that energy is the key, and it's the key to everything.
I agree with that 100%. So for all of you listening, please be watching for our next follow-up, which will be about energy patterns, how to break up these energies, what kinds they are, and what they mean. And I appreciate you being on today.
Thank you very much, Bonnie.